All right, Wednesday evening. We are potentially concluding the Noble Eightfold Path tonight. We'll see how far we go with that. Last week, we really tied in the integrated aspects of the path. We're at right concentration, which is the eighth piece here. And fundamentally, it's not the piece that alone, it's not the end of a path. It's not, when we talk about the Eightfold Path, there's not a linear approach. It's not, I do this first, I do that, and I do this, or I'm at this stage. The Noble Eightfold Path is interrelated, and we start with right view, but ultimately, to be free of suffering, ultimately to find liberation, we need to have supreme right view. We need to realize the nature of self and phenomena, and so the beginning is also the way out. And so this approach, and often it's very simple and practical to integrate these 8 pieces into the 3 higher trainings, which is wisdom, the right view, right intention, that's wisdom. Ethics, and that's going to be our right speech, right action, right livelihood, the ethics piece. And then for the concentration piece, which is what we're talking about today, there's actually 3 parts to that. There's right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So the implication here is that for me to really have that stability of mind, have that mind that can be imbued with wisdom, it has to be ethical. We have to create the conditions for it. We can't just take this unwieldy beast of the mind and sit down and just start meditating and training it and nailing it. And many people have tried, and many people have found it to be really quite harmful. That the sheer will of trying to train an unwieldy beast of the mind can be really damaging to the body. It can be damaging to the mind, and it doesn't create the conditions from which liberation flows. So we really need to tend to our minds in really healthy and nurturing ways. That's the ethics of what I'm bringing to mind and how I'm engaging in my life and how I'm relating to others. That motivation that we water bodhicitta, this great compassion. The merit and the conditions that we create so that when we train our mind, we actually have the right conditions to have a balanced state of mind. And it's imbued with some wisdom of knowing why I'm meditating and doing the right type of meditation for the result I would like, and utilizing those meditations in a way that can lead to a very clear and direct realization of the nature of self and phenomena. So it's a very interrelated process. When we talked a lot about that last week, that what I do off the cushion has a lot to do with what I do on a cushion. What I do on the cushion can be helpful to what I do off the cushion. But if I try to separate those two, and if I just focus on, I'm just a yogi, I'm just a meditator, I'm going to go away for a few years, I'm going to nail this. That's probably not going to be very helpful. But I can create the conditions for that. And that's, within our tradition of the Tibetans, they really focus on what we call nindro practice, purifies, creates conditions for that. But within the context of the Noble Eightfold Path, the whole path creates the conditions for that. So right effort's not going to be separate from right concentration. And just, again, right effort is really about bringing to mind and sustaining wholesome mental states. and noting when unhealthy or unwholesome mental states arise, and seeing if we can release those. And so that way of maintaining wholesome mental states, good aspirations, compassion, and so forth, and sustaining that, and our mindfulness will allow for that to happen. It's going to be essential. And these three, effort, mindfulness, and concentration, really are about unifying the mind and creating the opportunity to actually recognize accurately the nature of self, the nature of phenomena, and be free of all suffering, be free of all these afflicted mental states, to be free of all this karma and confusion, to be liberated, to not be in prison of samsara any longer. And in order to accomplish that, we're going to need to have a mind that is whole, serviceable, usable in the proper way. And so this takes a little bit of effort. Meditation is obviously one of them, but how we live our life is one of them, and how we attend to our minds, one of them, and understanding the fundamentals of the nature of self and phenomena is going to be a big part of that too. That's why we start with that right view, right intention, and we create those conditions, and we meditate, and they're interrelated. And we have this opportunity. So when we step back from this, what is really sweet about Buddhism, for me personally, what I think about, is that it's interested in one thing. Buddhism's not interested in blind faith. Buddhism's not interested in creating, a bunch of followers. Buddhism's interested in knowing what's true. That's fundamentally the answer. The answer is the truth. And so if we have a mind that is properly suitable, that's attentive and clear, that we can direct our single pointed attention to the nature of things and probe deeply at the nature of things, we'll have an opportunity to unravel some of those confusions and some of those layers of afflictions, and just unravel the deceptive appearance of people, places, things, events, phenomena, labels that I apply, and rest there to really poke at it, and to not just poke, not just to experience the nature of things, but to be able to rest and absorb the very nature of that experience, of how things are. And that's what it's interested in. So there's no need for dogma, there's no need for big belief system. There's essentially a desire to know what's true, and a strong desire to be free of suffering, and even more so, a desire to help others be free of suffering. With all those conditions and this opportunity to meditate and train the mind, we have the opportunity to bring about this right concentration. And that gets right to the point of right concentration is, why am I concentrating? Why am I developing my mind? Why am I honing this tool? And are we honing it so that we can be better at our job? Are we honing it for, opportunities to be a better bike rider or whatever it is, skier? Or am I honing this finely tuned tool with the mind to be free of all suffering, to be liberated? And there's a big difference in those motivations. So it's really valuable to be present with why I'm doing what I'm doing. Not that there's any problem with being a better bike rider or a better skier. It's much more helpful to avoid the trees that way. So absolutely nothing wrong there. It's just not going to liberate you. So there's these wonderful byproducts of developing my mind. But when they're the goal in and of themselves, we won't have the opportunity to really utilize it in a way that can be free of all suffering. So, so just before I begin, going a deeper dive into right concentration, just wanted to check in, see if anyone had any questions. Any came up from last week. I know it looks like we have quite a few people online as well, and I see some people at the Dharma Center. So just wanted to pause there, see if we had any questions before I dig a little deeper. Okay, sounds like we're good to go. So when we think about right concentration, there's two aspects of meditation that's commonly and traditionally taught within our lineages. And that is one, which we just did to start our session today, is developing shamatha, developing that fully focused mind that we can rest and utilize and achieve samadhi with, the mind that we can rest our attention, that we can really absorb right into the object of our meditation and transcend, let that conventional mind just fall away and all sense consciousness fade away, and just really bring the mind to the nature of mind, of awareness itself, and to be single pointed there, absorbed there. And every text, within Buddhism is going to talk about the necessity of that level of mind, that ability to rest in samadhi, to rest there, to have a mind that is not cluttered, a mind that this is that tool that we create, this great technology. And so it's incredibly, we would say it's essential. It's essential to develop that mind. So a lot of times people will just skip over concentration meditation, that's for that beginner stuff, just go ahead and, that breath thing. Or, if we have another object, just skip that. We'll go right to, Vipassana. We'll go right to another type of meditation. More advanced, we'll go do our Vajrayana meditations. We'll go to our visualizations. We'll do these other things. And unfortunately, those things, those other types of meditations, which are all designed for a very specific result, won't get a lot of traction if my mind isn't able to fully engage with those meditations. So valuable to really dedicate time and energy into one practice that's just focused on attention, whatever that practice is. There's many types. I use the breath today, but there's other objects meditation that we can do that with. And if we've got another practice, and this is the other piece of Vipassana, that Vipassana, for those of you, means insight. So the Vipassana meditations, these two categories, one's concentration, one's Vipassana, is where we're going to start to poke and probe at the nature of things, the nature of self, the nature of phenomena. And it's really the Vipassana that's going to, have the potential to unlock that prison of samsara. But if I don't have the foundation, the mind, this whole and complete mind of attention that's healed and well, this ability to rest my attention in those realizations, I'll tend to just get some experiences. And maybe I'll get some, maybe not, maybe I won't even get there, but I might get them. And I won't get the full force or the opportunity to really unlock my prison. And that insight can be quite fleeting. So the Buddha's big breakthrough, there were meditators way before the Buddha. There were incredible yogis before the Buddha. There were these great yogis, sadhus, pandits. I mean, they were there, and the Buddha studied with them. The Buddha went and studied with them, and he had one teacher. He followed the whole path through. He got to the most subtle levels of samadhi, and he's beyond, experiencing the body, and just incredible absorption and aware non-dual nature of self and reality. And then after meditation, he noticed that the mental afflictions, the conceptions, samsara was still present. So he wasn't free. And what he thought was, this is not liberation, this is a vacation. Right? I'm still trapped in this body, I'm still trapped in mental affliction. There's nothing, irreversible in that sense of eradicating the cause of suffering has been eradicated. And he'd gone through the most subtle forms. And so he went to another teacher and he went through the same process and came to the same conclusion. He studied hard, those teachings are valuable, these are great yogis, and those teachings are incredibly valuable. And his big epiphany was he remembered a time. There was a story where he remembered a time in his youth where he was under a tree and he was resting, and his mind just slipped sort of naturally in a state of what we'd call shamatha now. Just slipped there, and his mind thought, could that be the way? And the distinction here is that when you go through the jhanas, when you go through these subtle, very subtle levels of mind, and those subtle in these samadhis, well, what happens is, you lose sense consciousness, you're not in contact with your body, sound, all those things, and you get more and more subtle. And that cognitive mind, that very gross mind that has concepts and labels and all that stuff we see, well, that's not available to us. And I say us, like I've never achieved that. So not available to those yogis, people that are in that level. But at this level of shamatha, it's in that first entry point where there is a dissolution of mind, where you're resting in the nature of mind. But it's not that subtle yet, and you still have access to a conventional mind. You still have access to, if you wanted to think about something, you could. You could pick up a thought if you wanted to. You could rest in the non-dual, that experience of, bliss, equanimity, bliss, and just the nature of mind itself, non-conceptual. Or you could have a thought. So it's actually toning it back down. Instead of going to the most subtle states, it's coming back down. And then he thought, well, that was his big innovation. He came back down. He rested in shamatha, what we call shamatha. And then he picked up his vipassana meditation. And then that was the examination, poking and prodding at the nature of the one who is observing, poking and prodding at the nature of phenomena. And it was that combination of vipassana and shamatha that was that big aha, wake up opportunity to where he could have those realizations and then rest in, saturate his mind with those realizations of the nature of self and reality, and then he woke up. He woke up, and that's the thing. The Buddha, didn't go anywhere. Samsara isn't, some other place. Nirvana is not some other place. It's the mind that's perceiving it is perceiving it in a way that just isn't accurate, and that's what's creating the cause and conditions of our stress, worry, fear, suffering, grasping, attachment, and so forth. So That's why it's so important to have right view, to start to understand that, you know, you don't need to change. My place doesn't change. I'm not going to nirvana. You know, I'm not leaving samsara. I am experiencing things more accurately. And those misconceptions and misperceptions about the nature of the world I'm living in and the body that I'm living in fall away. And wake up. That's essentially how the path works. And in order to wake up, we need to put in a little bit of footwork. First off, we need to know we're asleep. We need to know that how people and things appear to us are deceptive. And because they appear deceptively, I label and make things real in a way that they are not. Then I grab on and attach, and I start creating the karma, and the karma becomes the habits and the tendencies of how I perceive people and events and myself, and that habit energy contributes to the prison that I'm in of my mind misperceiving the nature of self and others. So, bringing this down to basics, how much of what we see and experience, it's funny, we started this with, where's John? That's an interesting question. Where is John? Am I in Colorado Springs physically? Am I on a screen in front of you? There's people I'm seeing in attendance online from all over. As a matter of fact, I'm staying in a house in Colorado Springs, and my kind hostess is upstairs on a computer seeing me on a screen in front of her upstairs, and I'm downstairs broadcasting to you in Carbondale and other places. Where's John? And, if we were to probe at where is John, the physical body that happens to be in Colorado Springs that's talking to a computer? Or is it more accurate to think the label John, the concept of John, is probably in your mind, right? However you perceive and think about me is a construct of your mind, how you experience what I'm sharing, whether you've had other experiences with me or not, what you may have known about me, whether you had pleasant experiences, not very pleasant experiences. But there's a construct in your mind of who John is. And then, where is John really? Well, probably more accurately, we start to poke this down. The concept John is in my mind. There's a physical body, accurate basis of designation, physical body, that is in Colorado Springs at the moment. But that body's changing. That personality, that experiences is changing. There's no frozen John that is somewhere, and that everybody perceives the same. And so this is where the Vipassana practice comes in very helpful. Not merely when I'm doing a Vipassana meditation, but having done some probing into the nature of my experience of things, I can start maintaining that experience as I engage with others. So when I start seeing others as, a jerk or fun or not fun, or, and the construct, the way I label these people or the events or the things I do as bringing me joy or bringing me pain or suffering or annoyance or, happiness. Well, it'd be nice to poke at that and say, well, is that true? Are they the cause of my annoying? Are they the cause of my anger? Are they the cause of my joy? Are they the cause of my peace of mind? Because deceptively, it sure looks like that. When so-and-so's here, especially if they're bringing me ice cream, they're the source of my happiness. And when they act in a different way, they're the source of my mental and emotional suffering. And as long as I believe that and reinforce that, I'll believe that to be true. And then that habit and that labeling, that misperception, I'm just going to reinforce all day long. And my mind, an untamed mind, is going to start to tell other people how so-and-so is a jerk, or how so-and-so is wonderful, or this is the best restaurant ever, or whatever that is. And then my friends will agree with me, and then I'll start reinforcing a world that doesn't actually exist anywhere except through the labels and the concepts that I built up in my mind about them, and whether or not I had a pleasurable or not so pleasurable experience with them. And never realize that the actual cause for anger, happiness, joy, sorrow, the cause of mental emotional states, are here, not out there. And that's why right view is so important in this whole process. And why right concentration is the ability to help support and maintain that view of reality to whatever degree of realization we're able to cultivate. Today's kind of a special day for me. I say kind of. It is a special day for me. 35 years ago today, August 21st, 1984, I had a realization. I had a little wake-up moment. And in that wake-up moment, something very new to me came to mind. And I was in the midst of incredible emotional and mental pain, of shame, of guilt, of pain, often described as pitiful, incomprehensible, demoralizing pain. It was actually 35 years ago and a day. And the epiphany that came was that all this mental and emotional suffering, all this pain these people who I love are feeling, well, that was because of me, right? For the first time in my life, 35 years ago, I had an epiphany that I'm not a victim. I had an epiphany that the reason I felt shame and guilt and all this stuff wasn't because of the way I was raised. It wasn't because of the environment I was in. It wasn't, at some point that may have been more or less influential, but it finally came true that the reason I felt shame is because I did shameful things, and something woke up. And so the next day, which was 35 years ago today, I did not pick up any alcohol or drugs or other types of drugs. Alcohol happens to be one, FYI. And so now today I'm celebrating 35 years of not using mind-altering substances. And this journey of awakening began 35 years ago. It began with a spark of a realization that the suffering I'm creating is here, not there. And we can have a nice, interesting intellectual conversation about that. But having an intellectual conversation about that won't change us from acting otherwise. I mean, how often, any one of us, if we look truthfully, do we look at someone and think, they are annoying. I would be so much happier if this person was different. I would be so much happier when I got this job. My life will be so much better when. How much in our life do we worry about how something may or may not turn out, in the belief that if it turned out this way or that way, my life would be really good or it would be really terrible. How much of our life is like that? Well, the question is, is that true? And this is what Vipassana looks at. Is that true? What's the cause of my mental emotional suffering? Is it the event itself, or is it the way I'm perceiving and experiencing the event? What's more true? And, we can have a logical conversation, a conceptual mind, understanding that, this person I find, whatever, upsetting, annoying, if they'd be different, I'd be happier. If I thought about that person a different way, we may find they aren't that annoying. For example, if I found out they had cancer, they had a limited time to live, suddenly this person that I was very concrete about as being, a terrible person, I might have a very different experience in that person. If someone told me about some of the good they did, I didn't know about, I might have a very different experience than that person. We do this all the time. I mean, one of the most just stark things for me in my mind is Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was America's dad. I don't think people think of him as America's dad anymore. But when we think of Bill Cosby, however we think about Bill Cosby, do we actually know Bill Cosby? Have we ever experienced Bill Cosby? Do we know? Do we know? Or is Bill Cosby a concept in my mind that has been created out of either watching TV shows or reading newspapers? And is this person all good or all bad? Were they helpful at some points and not helpful at other points? And how can my perception of a person being this way now happen this way? And then we think we know ourselves and we think we know other people. And so the world that we live in, I say all the time, that we really believe that, if we eat right and exercise, we won't die. Live long, get the right job, right house, right relationship, we're going to be happy. We will spend a majority of our life trying to decorate the outside events in our world to create some happiness and peace and joy in our lives. The question is, can that actually give it? Or is our experience of them actually creating the stress, worry, fear, and anxiety I have in my life because those outer events and experiences can't provide me the freedom I'm seeking? It's how I'm perceiving the events and experience. So commonly happens, instead of finding joy and inner peace in our worldly existence, we wind up decorating samsara to make our prison cell nice. It'd be pretty cool to have a prison cell with jacuzzi. That's what I was thinking. I don't have one, but kind of nice to have one. And it should also have one of those soda streams, because I really like fizzy water. I'm working on that. We got one that's kind of broken. But when we think about it, how much of our life are we sitting around trying to decorate, samsara, thinking that it will make me happy? And then we can have a discussion and realize, that it doesn't work like that. And then we can get it. We can have a nice Dharma talk. We can go, right, that doesn't even make sense. I've had all these events in my life. I've had millions of them. I can't even count how many wonderful events and times and moments in my life where everything went exactly the way I wanted. And yet I can be in distress right now in this moment. I mean, that is my experience. And I've never met any other human being or animal for that matter who hasn't experienced mental, emotional suffering and loss and grief and pain and accidents and all of these things that we struggle to not have happen in our lives, who haven't experienced death and grief, etc. Haven't met another person, just haven't. And yet my mind will say, but it shouldn't happen to me. So what I'm getting at here is that the world that we're experiencing and how we experience the world, we've created out of sheer habit of reinforcing concepts and labels and belief systems that aren't based in reality or the nature of things, on how things work. And Vipassana is designed to help us question those misperceptions so that we can see more accurately, so we can recognize the nature of things. And it's one thing to have an intellectual understanding that you are not the source of my happiness or joy. It's a whole nother one to have the realization that that's true. That it doesn't even make sense to the mind that you can make me happy or sad. That's a very different state of mind. And that realization can happen with a mind that is serviceable, with a mind that has spent some time in meditation, analyzing those situations, the cause of anger, the cause of joy, the cause, which by the way are mental and emotional states. That's why the cause isn't out there. The cause is here. We don't have the seeds of anger. Anger doesn't arise. If we don't have the seeds, of frustration and so forth, they don't arise. There's no seed. It can't arise. And if I understand then that you can be a condition that triggers the seed, not the cause, but a condition that gives rise to anger, just like the sun and water and soil for a tree. If there's no seed, there's no tree. Doesn't matter how much soil, water, etc. No seed, no tree. Where's the seeds of anger come from? And are they based in misperception? Do I actually think people shouldn't change? My relationship shouldn't change. My job shouldn't change. My town shouldn't change. Do I actually think that people should be nice to me all day? Do I actually think that people shouldn't rob me? Do I live in a world that's accurate? Do I think I shouldn't get sick? Or I shouldn't break my leg? Or I shouldn't get cancer? Or I shouldn't get Alzheimer's? So our minds will spend a great deal of time believing, no, I shouldn't get any of those things. And I'll be happy if I don't get them. And we may find that you could be in a nice house with a jacuzzi and some fizzy water and still be worried or stressful or grief-stricken, or even having moments of despair. And then the mind will say, but if I have this next thing, or if this next thing happens, then I'm going to be okay. And the thing is, talking about it doesn't change it. And that's why it's so essential that we put into practice the tools that examine whether or not these are true. They're not true because I say they're true, or we can rationally obviously we can objectively sit back and see how our attitudes and thoughts and habits and conditionings and how we experience things creates more or less suffering. But to deeply probe those questions, to spend some time probing those questions, to spend some time with a mind that's clear probing those questions can really give a different experience and realization of those questions. If I only ask those questions for 10 minutes at a Dharma talk one day, or, you know, in a conversation with a friend, or I go to a retreat, and then I spend the rest of my life trying to make my samsara nice, it's going to be pretty hard to break myself out of prison, because I'm actually reinforcing the prison every day, and I'm spending a little bit of time, and I'm wondering why I still get caught up in these misperceptions. That's why it's so essential that we take time to cultivate our minds. Bhavana, to cultivate this meditation, is to cultivate a mind, to cultivate our attention, to cultivate wisdom, to cultivate, to develop ourselves so that we can see very clearly, experientially, with some realization, the source of my suffering and the source of my joy. Because all too often, when I think I'm cultivating joy, I'm actually creating the seeds of my suffering. Because I think things should be this way or that way. So I threw out a few things. I'm going to pause here for a moment. Clearly, this is a pep talk. I can tell by how excited you guys are in the room. And just see if anyone had any questions, and those of you online as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you are not the source of my happiness, my joy, my anger, then how am I to say, like, that if I myself then am not the source of your joy or your suffering? So then shame, you had talked about feeling shame because you had done shameful things. I think about that, and how does that really, I mean, why should I be compassionate to others if I am not the source of their joy or suffering? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I think so. And an excellent question, you know, because you are tapping into something that is just so critical, so critical. If we, again, don't have a good foundation in the nature of things, it's pretty common to have an existential crisis. Well, then nothing matters. Other people don't matter. This doesn't matter. It's all me. And that's not what we're saying. I apologize to those who have heard this several times, but there's a lot of people online and some people that maybe have not heard this. And I use the analogy of a tree. And the analogy of the tree is really helpful because when we're talking about the cause has to be of the same stuff as the result. So, which is different than a condition. And we need both. So we need people, we need events, we need that. But so a cause, so the cause for a tree is the seed, right? The seed's the same stuff, right? It's the same material, then it becomes a sprout, then it becomes a tree, then it becomes leaves, and then there's a seed. It's the same stuff. But you can have seeds and you don't have a tree, right? Seeds don't become trees without conditions, without soil, without nutrients, without water, without sun. Likewise, anger is a mental state. The cause of anger has to be within the mind. That's where mind, right? It's the cause. But the conditions are like, I can have the seed of anger, but if there's no one showing up to trigger that seed of anger, I don't get angry, right? I'm pretty mellow. You may have noticed you've been happy and then somebody walks in the room, then you're not happy, right? And so I was pretty cool. I had the seeds of anger, no anger. Somebody walks in, I get angry. They're the conditions that gave rise to anger. Well, they're also the conditions of our enlightenment. They're the conditions of our compassion. They're the conditions that give rise to me experiencing a sense of self and a way of interacting with others that cultivates a path of awakening. So we very much need others. As a matter of fact, you need others to eat, right? You need others to wear clothes. You need others to have a building that you're in. You need others, animals and all of this to exist on any level. So it's incredibly important to have others. As a matter of fact, the first verse of the 8 verses of thought transformation, which we'll be doing a retreat on in November, is recognizing all other sentient beings are as more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. And what that means is that a wish-fulfilling jewel is sort of this mythical thing that could grant any wish. But others can offer us something that no wish-granting gem could offer. And that is a direct realization of ourselves. Others offer us an opportunity to cultivate compassion, to cultivate wisdom, to understand suffering, to sustain our lives. Every other being is appearing to us. Is there a being that ever appears to us that doesn't help us or provide the opportunity for us to cultivate more wholesome mental states, more opportunity to grow, more opportunity to improve yourself? So it's critical that we engage with others in ways that are really wholesome and nurture a direct understanding. That, matter of fact, we can think we're filled with a lot of loving kindness, and we don't have much to work on until my friend Jimmy shows up. Oh my, I thought I was doing pretty good. Jimmy's pushing every button I got. And I didn't even know I had those. I thought I was doing pretty good. So does that help us with your question?
Yes, thank you.
The experience that we're having and how we interact with others. In other words, so one of the most detrimental and why it's very challenging to talk about emptiness, the nature of things, in the way that we're kind of understanding that our experience of them is the subjective experience, and that there's no concreteness to how I'm experiencing them, that they're not frozen in time, they're not all this, they're not all that, is that people can fall into the idea that then nothing matters, in which case we will really miss an opportunity and probably create a lot of negative conditions for ourselves. And in fact, everything matters. Everything that I'm experiencing is creating, every movement of my mind, every action and interaction I'm having is creating a habit or a condition, a karmic imprint. And I can be watering the seeds of enlightenment. I can be nurturing the seeds of compassion, or I can be reinforcing the seeds of anger. So it all matters. I can use my shame to transform my life. Anyone online with a question?
I have a question, John.
Yes.
So in my mind, it's a lot easier to recognize the relationship in between concentration and ethics. So to recognize that the one assists the other. However, the Noble Eightfold Path starts with wisdom, and I'm having a harder time connecting the relationship between an entry point of this idea of wisdom to then leading into a movement towards concentration. So in the 3 higher trainings, how it ties in. And the only thing I can come up with so far is that because you then be willing to do the work, because you might recognize that there's potentials here to remove suffering. I can't figure it out.
Maybe we'll lean on Lama Yeshe. Said, since we all want happiness and ice cream's not the source of our happiness, we should investigate what the source of happiness. And I think that's where right view is essentially it's laying out a roadmap. There's mundane right view and then supreme right view. And mundane right view is very simple and straightforward, as you're pointing out. It's the roadmap. It just says, hey, things that you think and do have effect. So cause and effect. That if I reinforce certain habits and tendencies, guess what? I'm going to have certain habits and tendencies. And that for certain things that I do, there are results that happen. And so it's pointing us in the direction of understanding, the undercurrent nature of how things are that aren't always on the surface. Getting what I want doesn't make me happy, ultimately. If getting what I want, I did in a way I don't feel good about. That's a different thing. And so when we understand karma, and that's what right view, mundane right view is simply pointing out karma, the nature of things, cause and effect, and understanding that we, through our actions, can be cultivating the seeds of patience, kindness, compassion. We can be engaged in wholesome activities which result in conditions of more contentment, inner peace, and well-being. Or if we act in ways that are unwholesome and unhealthy, we can be cultivating the seeds of regret and despair, frustration, etc. And it doesn't look that way on the surface. I get what I want, I'm happy. A little lie here doesn't matter, stealing that doesn't matter, and I just engage in things, and I engage in habitual thinking. That's actually creating my prison. So right view is about helping us to stop creating a prison and start developing our liberation. And so that's why right view ties in to right at the start. It says, what we think, say, and do matters, and it has an impact, and here's how that works. And then as I engage, for example, in my ethics, my wholesome behavior, I can be creating the conditions then for that mind to have some realization. But if I don't have right view, it's going to be really hard to get anywhere, because my deceptive appearances, seem very real to me. And I really think that person is fundamentally, a good person or a bad person or an annoying person or this. I believe my labels, and I think they're intrinsically true, instead of understanding that my experience of a person has a lot to do with the seeds, the conditioning that I bring to that situation. So, not sure if that's helpful to you, but
Yes, it was.
that's what I got. The piece about right view at the start is, and I love Robina Corton. She says, just take it as a working hypothesis, and this is true or it's not. When you act in ways that you feel good about, that are wholesome, that are meaningful, see what the results are. When I act in ways that are unwholesome, that are selfish and greedy, how do you feel? What are the conditions that are created? And see what happens. And so there's a working hypothesis. And so it's not something to be taken because that's written in the Buddhist book, that's the way it is, I'm signing on the dotted line. It's, oh, well, let's see if it's true. And, I think there's some fundamental, very quick experiences we can do. And one of them is just simply shifting your attitude towards an event and see if that changes your experience of the event. Right? So I mentioned one earlier, someone I don't like, I find out they have cancer, they're going to be dead next week. Would that change your experience of them? What if, I just had the attitude, the understanding, that my life is dependent upon so many people I don't even know for the food I eat, the roads I drive on. How much gratitude would I have when I think about how many people are responsible for the piece of bread I get to eat this morning? What I attend to and how I attend to it have an incredible impact on my experience. You don't need to be Buddhist for that. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy, psychology. They had this great scientific breakthrough that your thoughts are connected to your emotions. And if you change the way you think about something, you can change your emotions. It's an amazing breakthrough that people have been studying for thousands of years. And so we can play with this and see how that's true. So right view is really helpful to understand that my attitude about something has a lot to do with how I'm experiencing something, and that how I'm experiencing something is not objectively the way it is. But my mind grabs onto that. And then why does my mind tell me if I get this next job, if I get this next thing, if my partner acts a certain way, if this, if that, then I'm going to be happy? Why does it do that? Is that true? Have you ever had those things happen, and how long did your happiness last? So right view is like, well, let's see how things really work. And that's where right concentration is going to be just pivotal, because rather than spend a few moments on it in a discussion or reading a book or having an aha, and how many ahas have we had in our lives, is to really take some time to sit with this and bring it to mind and probe it. Take an experience I had and unpack it. Poke at it. Is that person really a jerk? Is that person, really that way? Am I really, this, we all have a story about ourselves, Am I a kind, patient, loving person? Well, maybe sometimes I'm also a not so kind, impatient person. Which one am I? Which story am I telling myself at a given moment? And notice that those change, that there's times I've been kind, there's times I've been not so kind. There's times I've been hurtful, there's times I've been helpful, there's times I've been patient, there's times I've been impatient. But my experience, the mental continuum, is moment to moment. And there's no solid moment that's John. That's why the good question, where is John? Because the John that's talking to you now is not the one that was talking to you when we began. And you're not the person you were when we started either. But that's not how we're perceiving things. So the whole of Buddhism is, let's just start seeing accurately. And so we need to create the conditions. We need to have some roadmap of where to begin with this right view. So we have a working hypothesis to kind of see how I'm contributing to my own mental and emotional suffering, which, by the way, key point, different from pain. Right? Physical pain, and that's your human body gonna have it. So when people say, don't need to feel pain, mental and emotional suffering is what we're talking about, which is I don't want the pain, or worry about even having pain. I can create suffering worrying about I might have pain. There's not even a physical pain there. So understanding that distinction too is really valuable. pain is one thing. This suffering is a different thing. This dissatisfaction, this stress, this tension, this way of being that is not settled and content and well. So Buddhism is really about alleviating that, and we alleviate it by just seeing what's true. Liberation is a realization of wisdom, of the nature of things. And so we stop creating karma that creates suffering. So, but that's a concerted effort. And here's the thing, it doesn't need to be some big, everybody, wow, it's a big journey. That journey starts with, right now, the journey starts with questioning. That journey starts with starting to meditate a little bit. That journey starts with wanting to meditate. That journey starts with a curiosity about this. My mind, 35 years ago, there's no way I had an inkling of how I would live today. And it started with an aspiration to not suffer. So the journey begins right now. And it's in small steps. It's in bite-sized steps. It's not go burn down the house and put on monk's robes and live in a cave. It's, you know what, let's go home and be nicer to our spouses, our partners, our kids, our employers. That's where we begin. Okay. Well, looks like we're coming up to 7:30, so I think that's a good note to our dedication on. If you didn't get to ask a question online, please, write it down, jot for next week. Next week, if I'm alive, I hope to be in person in Carbondale. Good plan. Like being there. Glad to see those of you there and those of you online, quite a group online. So let's take a little time to dedicate merit and wisdom that we've accumulated here today for the benefit of all sentient beings. Let us dedicate the merit and the wisdom that we've accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering. May they find the direct realization of their true nature and be liberated. May we be able to purify our own minds to create conditions that are suitable for more wise discernment, cultivation of compassion, and the path of awakening, so we can realize our true nature, our Buddha nature, be free of suffering. And may we also dedicate our merit and our wisdom to the long life of all the spiritual teachers of all spiritual traditions that are authentically offering teachings that reduce suffering and create the seeds and conditions for awakening. May they live long and may their teachings flourish.